Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Maseches Taanis, Daf Yud Zayin, starting about 12 lines or so from the bottom of Tez Zayin Amid Beis. We've been in the middle of a collection of brisas that speak about the Shmona Esrei that one would say on a fast day, as discussed in full color and in full detail. The Shmona Esrei that we say on a fast day, not the one that we say, but the one that they would say back in the day on a fast day, and certainly in the times of the Tanaim, was one that had 24 brachos. Really 25 with Valam al Shinin, but we'll speak simplistically, 24 brachos. The brachos were added, the extra 6 brachos were added between the bracha to Hashem Goel Yisrael and then the bracha Rifa'inu. They were plunked right in between there. The Gemara doesn't say why that's the case, but that's where they were put. I would imagine it's because Re'eva Onyin V'Riva Rivenu. That's what we saw yesterday. The Gemara says that we lengthened, that was what it meant, the Shviz, the 7th bracha was the bracha of Geula, because Re'eva Onyin V'Riva Rivenu Galinu Me'Rolaman Shemecha. That bracha is all about our tzaros. So that's presumably why the pashtus, why we added that the 6 brachos there.
Does anybody talk about why we don't follow that today?
I don't think that's the question to ask in particular. I think the larger question to ask is, why don't we do the 3 fasts followed by the 3 fasts followed by the 7 fasts? Because those are the old. You are a fair weather fan, my friend. You don't mind adding 6 brachos to Shmona Esrei, but you mind having 13 extra fasts. Right. So I don't know. I don't think it's as applicable because we have running water. So things are very different. I don't know if we ever trigger the Chazal incurred drought. I don't know. I don't know that it's ever happened. And we're not talking about on a regular Taanis. These Shmona Esreis were only on these special Tainios of the 3 and the 3 and the 7. So regular Taanis day, we're only talking about droughts. This is very specific and very, very chiseled out. And because we have running water and because we can even truck in water in theory, so how do we then determine a little bit of a shtuch? Hashem's like, I'm giving you a drought. We're like, don't worry, we're going to call in a truck. Everything is going to be okay. So I don't know exactly how it plays out, but it could just be that because of the way the world works, that we no longer have this issue of modern drought, as it were, because you can just run a hose and all will be well. I don't mean to be simplistic about it, but this doesn't apply to regular fast days. It only applies to the ones in the Mishnah. So 12 lines or so from the bottom, we're going to learn another brisa that sounds a lot like the Gemaras that we've been learning over the last day, and then we will switch sugyas. Kind of, sort of. The Gemara says at the 2 dots, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us. Al Rishonos, on the first, who Omer, what does he say? Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael min ha'olam ve'at ha'olam baruch Goel Yisrael. That's going to be the first of the 7 brachos that he'll say. V'hein onen acharav, they would answer after the Chazan finishes that bracha, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso L'Olam Va'ed. After that, V'chazna Knesses Omer, then the Gabbai would say, Tiku Kohanim Tiku, there should be a Tkiya. V'chozer, then the Chazan would go back, V'omer, and he would say, Misha'anes Avraham Bahar HaMoriah, Hu Ya'aneh Eschem, V'yishma V'kol Tza'akaschem, Hayom Hazeh, and that would be how the Chazan would come back in, and then Behain Token Umarian V'Token, the discussion if this belongs in the Gemara or not. Ba'alashnia, on the second bracha, who Omer Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael min ha'olam v'ad olam Baruch Zocher Hanishkachos, and then after he said that bracha, Behain Onen Acharav, they would then say Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso L'Olam Va'ed. V'chazna Knesset Zomer Hariu B'nei Aaron Hariu. As we saw yesterday, there's a Tkiya, a bracha, and then a Trua, always vacillating between the two. 6 lines, 5 lines from the bottom. But Omer, the Gemara says, Mishanas Avosenu Al Yamsu V'Yanas Chem V'Yishma B'Kol Tza'akaschem Hayom Hazeh. V'hein Marian V'Tokein Umarian. They're going back to a Tkiya. 4 lines from the bottom. V'chein M'chol Bracha Uvracha Be'achas Omer Tiku U'Ve'achas Omer Hariu Ad She'igmor Es Habrachos Kula. So they would alternate between a tkiya, bracha, trua, and it was always in between each bracha they were adding a tkiya and a trua. This also helps us to understand a little bit like the davening that we have by Musaf on Rosh Hashanah, where we start to insert things in. It's crisis mode, right? We're looking at challenge. We're looking at a scenario of things that are very difficult. So we add in the different tkiyas and truas. 3 lines from the bottom, the Gemara concludes here, as it did in a brisa we learned yesterday, with the following. This is exactly how he davened back in the day in Tzipori, Reb Chalafta, Reb Chananya bar Trajim b'Sichni. And while this happened in cities with individual gedolim, the Chachamim at large, they said, we don't agree with this. Amru, they said, Lo hayu noagin kain el b'shar mizrach v'har bayis. We only say Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso L'Olam Va'ed in certain places of the Beis HaMikdash. Good. Next, we saw the shita that there are 6 brachos that were added, and one of the shitas said that we say the first 2 was zichronos and Zichronos and Shofros. Is it Shofros? Yeah, Zichronos and Shofros from the Rosh Hashanah davening. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo hayatzarach lomar Zichronos. We didn't say that, and he swapped them out with two other brachos. And on the very last line of the Gemara on Tezayin Amud Beis, the Gemara details why it is that he swapped them out. Amar of Ada Demin Yafo. My time of Rabbi Yehuda. Why is it that Rabbi Yehuda didn't want to say Zichronos and Shofros? Says the Gemara, Lepi shein omrim Zichronos v'Shofros tap of Yazayin Amud Aleph el b'Rosh Hashanah u'v'Yovelos u'v'Shas Milchama. Wow. That is a dramatic finish. The reason why we don't say Zichronos v'Shofros on Taanis is because the day is not yet dramatic enough. It only happens on Rosh Hashanah and Yovel and when there's war. Those are the only times we say Zichronos and Shofros. That should be raising the bar for us emotionally when we think about Zichronos and Shofros on Rosh Hashanah. That brings us to line 2. Yud Zayin Amud Aleph ala Rishon Homer Misha'ana es Avram. We spoke about Avram. Now here the Gemara is going to say that the chasima of one bracha might apply to a different bracha. Tana yesh machlif in tza'aka le'Eliyahu utfila l'Shmuel. Some say we say the bracha that ends with tza'aka. Baruch, whatever the bracha was, Shomea Tza'aka and Shomea Tefillah L'Shmuel, we swapped it. So it says the Gemara that only works in one direction. Bishlam, I could understand switching the brachas around. Gabe Shmuel, because Shmuel could tolerate either one Ksiv Beit Tefillah, Ksiv Beit Tza'aka. He has both languages in Psukim there. But Eliyahu doesn't have both languages in Psukim, so not both chasimas will work for him. Tefillah ksiv, tza'aka lo ksiv. So he should be able to have the bracha of Shomea Tefillah, not the bracha that ends with Baruch Atah Shomea Tza'akos. So what should he do? It doesn't work. Says the Gemara, that's not correct, because by Eliyahu the pasuk says Aneni Hashem Aneni, and that is an equivalent to a lashon tza'aka, and therefore the brachas in theory can be switched. 6-7 lines down, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph ala Shishi Somer Mishanas Yona and ala Shvi Somer Mishanas David. So says the Gemara, these are historically out of order. A basic review of Jewish history, Michti, Yonah, Basar, David, and Shlomo Haba. Yonah lived after David and Shlomo, yet for some reason his bracha is the 6th and David and Shlomo is the 7th. So why are they historically out of order? So says the Gemara, my taima makdim leberesha. Why did Yonah, who lived after David and Shlomo, why did Yonah come in the 6th bracha? Why did his bracha get mentioned over there and David and Shlomo in the 7th? Historically speaking, they should be reversed. Says the Gemara, mishum deboy lemichtam Mirachem al haaretz. We had to answer with the bracha Mirachem al haaretz, and that specifically applied to David and Shlomo. And Tana, we have another brisa that says the bracha should have concluded differently. Mishum sumchas amru baruch mashpil haramim. The bracha should have concluded that way. Okay, very different versions of how to do this Shemona Esrei. I don't know if we have a siddur that has comprised all of the shinui nuschos. I've never seen it anywhere else other than this Gemara. I don't know. But that's what the Gemara says, quarter of the way down at the 2 dots, Shalosh Tanios or Rishonos Mishmar, Anshe Mishmar Misanen V'lo Mashlimin. Yeah, the other day we had a discussion, a machlokas between the Tanaim about the different gradations of fasting for those who are in a Mishmar and active versus those who are in a Mishmar and inactive. And then the Gemara says, what about their alcohol consumption? Are the Kohanim in the times of the Beis HaMikdash allowed to drink? Let me expand it a little further. Are the Kohanim today allowed to drink? Question mark. Hard stop. That's a really good question because it's a big machlokas in the Gemara. And we will see shortly what's going on here. Tana Rabban and the rabbis have taught us. Why is it that the people who are part of the mishmar, but not actively doing the avoda, why is it that we say that they are allowed to drink at night, but that they're not allowed to drink during the day? So the concern is that maybe there will be so much work to be done during the day. So they'll be called up from the reserves. It's their day anyways for the mishmar, but it wasn't. It's their week, I should say, for the mishmar, but it wasn't their day. So they're relaxing. They're chilling in the back of the Beis HaMikdash in the Beis HaMokah. We learned in Maseches that was the room that they hung out in. So they had to be ready. So they couldn't be drunk during the day. Fine. What about the people who were active? The people who not only that it was their mishmar, but in addition to it being their mishmar, they're going to mamish be doing the avoda, the korban tamid shel shachar in the morning. So why did we say that they can't drink it all? And we'll see soon that to do the avoda when one is drunk is a big problem. We'll get there on the top of the next of the next Talmud. And here is the mic drop moment. Says the Gemara, last short line, Mikan Amru. Kol Kohen, Shemakir Mishmarto, any Kohen who knows what Mishmar he was a part of, and as well, Umishmeres Beis Av Shelo, and he knows what day of the week he was supposed to do Mishmar, V'yodea Shebate Avosav Kavun Sham, and he knew that his family was really established on that day. Aser Lishtos Yain Kol Oso Hayom, forever. Let's say your day was Tuesdays on the 4th week of the year, you could never drink. because maybe the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, and then you're stuck. What if b'makir mishmarto ve'ein makir mishmeres beis avshalo? You know that you're in the mishmar of the second week of the year, but you don't know what day of the week you're supposed to be. V'yodea shabbat avos of kuan sham. You know that it was that week, but you don't know what day. Asher lishtos yain kolos Shabbos. That whole week you're not allowed to drink. And then is the crazy part. Eino makir mishmarto mishmeres beis avshalo. But v'yodea shabbat avos of kuan sham. You know that your family was an active family as a Kohen, that they were serving in the Beis Hamikdash, but you don't know not only what day, but you don't even know what week you were obligated. The halacha is, says the Tanna Kama, Aser lishtos yain kol hashana, period. That means that according to this shita, and that's us today, because we don't know when our mishmaros, where nobody, to my knowledge, has a Masorah of what week of the year and certainly what day of the week. I mean, their paperwork, I don't know how far back we go. As far as I know, nobody has a clue about this stuff. And if that's true, says the Gemara, that according to the Tanna Kama, who seems to be in the majority opinion, it should be completely usher for a Kohen to drink ever. That's an incredible halachic issue, right? If you're thirsty, Avi, you should probably go with some water, unless you know exactly when it was.
Is it Cohen is not even there Israel or something?
Well, that's not relevant, but we'll all be Bekanfei Nisharm. I don't know what the logistics are, but COVID, how does COVID work? They close the country, parachutes. It's going to be a problem. Yeah, we got to do a little beam me up, Scotty. That's right.
Does the Shulchan Aruch actually bring this as halakha?
The Rambam does. I don't believe it's in Shulchan Aruch. No, yeah, it doesn't look like it's in Shulchan Aruch. But the Rambam does bring it. Either way, that's the sheet of the Tanna Kama. However, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the famed Rebbe, halfway down on the page, 5 lines into the wide lines, he is our ticket out for Kohanim to drink. Rabbi Omer Ani, which again is a classical language of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Kohen Aser Lishtos Yain La'olam. It really should have been the case that a Kohen is not allowed to drink. However, Aval Ma E'eseh Shetakanaso Kil Kalto, that which fixes him is that which breaks him. This is just a catchphrase, and what it means is the fact that there is no Beis Hamikdash gives him enough of a reason to be able to drink nowadays. Fine. And Omar Abaye says, Kiman Shasu Ha'idna Kahane Chamra, according to whom do the Kohanim rely upon to be able to drink nowadays? Answers the Gemara, Kir Rebbe at the 2 dots. That's the shita of Rebbe. That's the lenient shita. What about Yachid v'Rabbi Malacha Kirabim? Good methodology question. I don't know. Maybe some of the point raised Chutz La'aretz versus Eretz Yisrael is an Afkamina. I don't know. Maybe the Dore Doros. I mean, Rebbe knew because Rebbe was so close. They could ask a grandparent what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't that long ago. Rebbe died in 220. So let's say I don't know how old he was when he died. Let's say he was 50 years old. He was born in 170. The Beis Hamikdash was only destroyed 100 years earlier. 100 years earlier. My grandfather would have been over 100 at this point. So we would have had the information. It would have been very accessible as to whether or not your family was a Kohen family. Was it this week? No, you were the next week. We could figure it out 100 years back. So Rebbe knew, and Rebbe already was going to be Mekel and say Nebuch. The Churban already took place. We'd have to get into the Nosei Kalim on the Rambam to see how we pass him. A little bit more than halfway down, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, 6-7 lines into the wide lines. Says the Gemara, Anshe Mishmar v'Anshe Maimed Asur L'Saper L'Chabes. The people who are doing the Mishmar, who are doing the Avodah on the Beis Hamikdash, they're not allowed to get haircuts and they're not allowed to do laundry. But Uvechamishi on Thursdays Mutar Mibnei Kvod Shabbos. But because of Kavod Shabbos, a person is allowed to do so. My time. What is the reason for the initial injunction that they're not allowed to get haircuts and to do laundry? Because if you restrict them, they'll end up behaving a little bit better as they walk in. Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kadesh Lo Yikansu L'Mishmartam Kshehin Menuvalin. Yeah, you can't walk in to do the avodah looking like a shlump. You got to get a haircut before you show up. It's a big avodah. You're walking before Kadosh Baruch Hu, ABCs. We have the same din by Yontif. You're supposed to get a haircut before Yontif. So one of my Rabbeim and Smicha actually told me this din. He said, we were talking about getting haircuts. I said at the time, theoretical question because it didn't play out. But what would be the halacha if the only way to get a haircut for the mitzvah of Yontif is if the person giving you a haircut is female? So that, first of all, depends on the person. If by the person they can't avoid hirurim, then it's usher 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that's going to be problematic. If that's not the problem, so then the isser, there is no isser of any physical contact because of the context. And had it been that there, so that was what he said. Very interesting psak. I'd never heard it anywhere else. I've never seen it in writing. But anyways, you can't walk into the Beis Hamikdash looking like a menuval. That's the language here, menuval, which means if you don't get a haircut, you're a menuval. That's how the language That's what the Gemara seems to imply. It's a bit of a strong language. Anyways, let's move from here into a longer conversation about getting haircuts 2/3 of the way down in Yud Zayin and Aleph. The Brisa brings Tanu Rabbanan Melech Mistaper B'chol Yom. The king, he has to get a haircut every single day. Kohen Gadol Erev Shabbos Erev Shabbos. Kohen Gadol every Friday morning wakes up, mikvah, shachars, haircut every single week. Kohen Hedyot, a regular Kohen Achas L'Shloshim Yom, once a month. Why is it that Melech Mistaper B'chol Yom? My time. Why? Because Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Zav Amar Kra, the pasuk says Melech B'Yof Yov Techaz Einaynecha. We should see that the king always looks beautiful. What about a Kohen Gadol? We said Erev Shabbos, my time. Why does the Kohen Gadol have to get a haircut every Friday? Because Amar Reb Shmuel Bar Yitzchak Kol Mishmaros Mischachos, because he's going to see a new group of people, a new group of Kohanim coming. He has to look like a mensch. He has to look put together. So every Friday the Kohen Gadol would get a haircut. What about Kohen Hedyot Achas L'Shloshim Yom Minalan? Where do we know that from? That says the Gemara is not a svara, but rather Asya Pera Minazir. That we learn from a Gzeira Shava. What's a Gzeira Shava? Ksiv Hacha, 12 lines from the bottom. Ksiv Hacha by us, meaning by Kohan, and the pasuk says, "V'rosham lo yigalechu, pera lo yishalechu, v'chziv hasam kadosh yagadol pera se'ar rosho." One pasuk by us, one pasuk by Nazir. Malahalan shloshim avkan shloshim. We know that stam nazir is shloshim yom, and just like if a person were to accept upon themselves to be a Nazir, they couldn't get a haircut for 30 days. That's how we know what the maximum is, that a Kohen is not allowed to go that long. You're not allowed. 31 days is problematic. A regular Kohen, an active Kohen, cannot go more than 30 days. Says the Gemara, how do we know by Nazir, right? You're making a bridge between Kohen and Nazir. How do you know? It says the Gemara, the Nazir gufei minan. How do we know that a Nazir has a rule of 30 days? So says the Gemara, we're going to answer from the following. Amar Rav Masna Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom Minal. And how do we know that if a person accepts upon themselves Nazirus without establishing a timeline, that we assume that they're Nazirus Shloshim Yom? Says the Gemara, Amar Kra, where's Rabbi Shechter when you need him? Yihya Bigamatria Tlasan Habe. Yud plus Hey plus Yud plus Hey is 30, and therefore we know that it's 30 days. Givaldik. Says the Gemara, Amalei Rav Papa Le'abai. Hold on one second. V'dil Mahachi Kama Rachmana Lo Lirbu Klal. Maybe, just maybe, we should look at the psukim and say that the Kohen's not allowed to let his hair grow at all. That this Gzeira Shava is exactly like you said. So the Gemara picks up on the words, a distinction that I don't know that I would have ever made on my own. Amar le, you have a kasav lo yishalchu pera, that you should not be sent pera, you should not be sent with long hair. Then I agree with you, kidika amris. But hashta dechsivu pera lo yishalechu, that uncut, your hair uncut, you should not be sent, which is only a tiny difference in language. Peralehavu. So that's not the same thing, that you're allowed to grow your hair, but shluchehu de lo lishlechu, but you're not allowed to let your hair grow very long. That's the distinction that's made based on the psukim and based on the way to read the psukim. And therefore, we assume that 30 days is the maximum that a Kohen can go without getting a haircut. Hachi afilu ha'idna nami. According to the Tanakama, who said that the restrictions by wine applied, why don't we have the same restrictions that applied by wine applying nowadays to haircuts? That maybe no Kohen should go more than 30 days without a haircut? Okay, so says the Gemara, maybe we should assume that the halachos are the same. Maybe we should say that when it comes to drinking wine, it's bizman biyahu de aser, that only in the times when there's hava in the Beis Hamikdash, when you're actually doing the avoda, that it's aser, but shelo bizman biyashar, but when there is no hava in the Beis Hamikdash, when you're not actually entering the Beis Hamikdash, afachanami, we can assume the same thing, just like by alcohol, we can assume as well by haircuts. Says the Gemara, not so simple. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Rabbi Omer ani kohanim asrin lishtos yayin leolam. We saw this shita already, that Rabbi was of the opinion that a Kohen is never allowed to drink wine, but he built in the kula of alma esesh takanaso kilkalto, that which is causing the problem is also the solution, namely that there's a churban, nebach. What are we supposed to do? And on that brisa of Amar Abai Kiman Shasu Idna Kane Chamra, like we saw earlier, top of Yadzayin and Mabez, that was a shita kirebi. Now, if we say that Abai was asked the question and he said that really we hold like Rebbe, what does that imply? Michlal de Rabbanon Asrei, that the rabbis do forbid getting haircuts just like they do by wine. So remember, we saw this machlokas on the middle of Yud Zayin and Aleph, that the Tanakama was of the opinion that it's usher to drink wine when you don't know when your mishmar is as a Kohen, and seemingly the implication would be here that it's equally forbidden to get a haircut. So it says the Gemara, you can't compare the two. My taima, why is it that we don't say that a haircut, that a Kohen is allowed to go more than 30 days nowadays, even though he may not be allowed drink according to the Tanakama. Again, we paskin like Rebbe, but what about the Tanakama? What about the Rabbanan? So says the Gemara, Behera Yibana Beis Hamikdash. Yiratzon Hashem should bring it back very quickly in our days. And if that's true that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built, so maybe we could have said the Kohen he's got dreads. It's unacceptable. So says the Gemara, what are you talking about? You can't compare inebriation to a haircut, because you can remove one very quickly and not the other. Says the Gemara, Hacha efshar d'mesaper v'ayil. Go get a haircut. It takes 10 minutes. Go get a haircut. Yachi, says the Gemara, Shisuye yayin nami. Says the Gemara, seemingly giving a trick for removing the drunken effects of alcohol, the inebriating effects. Says the Gemara, the same thing with wine. Efshar the gunning ports of ayil. Go lie down for a little bit, and then you'll take a short nap, a cat nap, and then all will be well. You can go do your avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara. What? Well, in a moment, you will see that this is not what you're talking about. So says the Gemara, you laid that one up for me. Just wait, Mark. Says the Gemara, Kid Rami Bar Abba. What does Rami Bar Abba say? Dama Rami Bar Abba, Derech Mil, V'Sheina Kolshehu, Nefigan Esayayin. That when a person walks a meal, that's a machlokas in the poskim, how long a meal is. Do we say it's an 18-minute walk, a 22-minute walk, a 24-minute walk? So that's about a mile, approximately, give or take. And a little bit of a nap, Kolshehu, Nefigan Esayayin. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Lav mi itmar, doesn't it say, Lav mi itmar, Allah, Amar of Nachman, Amar Rabba Bar Avua, Lo Shanu. When do we say that taking a walk and taking a nap is helpful? El Kishashasa Shiur revius. That's only true if you drank up to a revius of wine. But for those of us who consume a little bit more than that, of al shasa yoser me revius, if somebody's packing it, they're drinking a little bit more than a revius, and if that revius is not wine, but it's something a little thicker, a little heavier than alachas kama v'kama, depending on the proof of the liquid. Aval shasa yoser me revius kol shekain shederach matridaso. The going on a walk will make you stumble all over yourself. The shena mishakarto, and the sleep will make things even worse for you, all the more so. So says the Gemara, that's one of the reasons why we can't compare the two, that alcohol is very different than haircuts. When a person drinks more than a revius, it's much harder to recuperate as it relates to their inebriation than getting a haircut. Haircut doesn't have a long-lasting effect. Go get a haircut, come back to the Beis Hamikdash and do your avoda, all is well. That's answer number one. Rav Ashi Amar, Shisuya yayin demachle avoda. When it comes to yayin, it can create a big problem. It can make a psul in the avoda. So therefore, Gazru B'hu Rabbanan. Therefore, the rabbis were of the opinion that the Kohen cannot go more than that a Kohen is not allowed to drink. However, Paru Rosh to lo machle avoda. But if a person was Paru Rosh, their hair, we say Paru Rosh means that your hair is uncovered, but it means that your hair is grown out for more than 30 days. Lo machle avoda, where it doesn't create a psul in the avoda. So lo Gazru B'hu Rabbanan. So there we don't need to have a stringency, because yet another distinction between the world of someone who's drinking and the world of someone who needs a haircut. So Meisve, the Gemara says, your assumption that you just made is not true. You were just of the assumption that if there's a Kohen who has long hair, that there's not a psul in the avoda. Incorrect, says the Gemara. About a quarter of the way down, Yud Zayin at base 15 lines down. Meisve, Elu hein shebemisa, shisuye yain paru rosh. Very clear. Both of these things are problematic. So Ravashi, how Ravashi can you tell me that the Rabbanan can make a distinction between getting drunk and getting a haircut? Because getting drunk, if a Kohen does the avoda drunk, it's a psul in the avoda. Masha Enkin, if they have long hair, it's not a psul in the avoda. The Brisa says it's a psul in the avoda. That's misa. Bishta Moshe Suya Yain, says the Gemara, wait a second, let's check our Mari Makomo. So I could understand in regards to alcohol, the head Yaksiv Behu, the Pasuk says very clearly, Yain B'Shechar Al Tesht, a person should not drink wine or old wine. That's unacceptable. But how do we know that there's a psul in the avoda for someone whose hair is a little bit too long? Minolan, how do we know? Says the Gemara, so one pasuk says that you shouldn't let your hair grow. So the pasuk says that a Kohen can't drink. And because these two psukim are juxtaposed, so therefore we make a comparison between getting haircuts and drinking wine. Oh, beautiful. So the Gemara makes its comparison to say, just like the Brisa indicated, that both of them are psul in the avoda. Again, just doubling down on the question on Ravashi and Umina, and from there, so what can you do? If the psukim look that way, so then Ravashi is up a creek. He doesn't have an answer anymore. So the Gemara looks at we're going to take these parentheses and distill them all down to one word, which is kasha. That's what the Rishonim write over here. Not the Rishonim, I should say the editors of the Gemara, the Hagos V'Tzionim, they write over here, V'chol zel leisa b'sanhedrin, elamasik sham kasha. Ayin Sham, V'Tosfos Sham, that we just basically remove all these words and say kasha, that the Gemara poses a question and leaves it in question mark form for Rav Ashi. Next, Amar the Ravina the Rav Ashi. Hold on one second. Man Amra. How do we know in regards to the hair, the pasuk that was quoted in regards to the hair of a Kohen, it was quoted by Yechezkel. So hold on one second. Yechezkel is not Moshe. So the halacha had to be true before Yechezkel too. So, but we're talking about a psul deraisa man amra. There's no pasuk in Chumash that says that there's anything wrong with a Kohen having long hair. So we knew that Yechezkel knew it, but how did Yechezkel know it? Amar lehu litamecha. According to you, there's a lot of things that are not found in the Chumash that the Nevi'im spoke about. Hada amar Rav Chizda davar zemi Toras Moshe lo lamadnu. We have something that wasn't taught in Moshe's Torah. Midivrei Kabbalah lamadnu, and we have this thing that we did learn. What did we learn? So it says the Gemara, Kol ben nechar erel lev erel basar lo yavel el mikdashi. That a person who is an era lave or an era basar, they can't come into the base of mikdash. How would we have known that this was true? It's not found in for arelus.
No, for orla purpose. I mean,
Orlas halev or orlas haguf.
Orlas
Orlas haguf is a problem because a person, halachically speaking, might be an arel. It's a machlokas rishonim if they're an arel, if they've been circumcised but their bris is not kosher. It's a discussion in the Rishonim with halachic nafkaminas of whether or not you make a bracha for atafas dam bris. So whenever we do atafas dam bris, we're hopefully removing them from the category of arel. We're certainly helping them fulfill the mitzvah of bris milah. However, we don't make a bracha because some of the Rishonim were of the opinion that nothing really needed to be done, but we're makbet. It paters tachanun. You're welcome. It paters tachanun, but the moel will not make a bracha under the circumstances. I don't know. Betsy made a bracha when I did a bracha, whatever. Now I need to go back and edit. I know. I'm going to finish. Let's go. So it says the Gemara, if that's true, forget about our question by us about the Kohen's length of hair. We don't have a pasuk. Where did Yechezkel get it from? You have this happens many times where we have things that are in Divrei Kabbalah, but they're not in the Divrei Torah. Ela Gemara Gamirla. Obviously, that was a tradition that Erel Lev and Erel Basar can't come into the Beis Hamikdash. V'asa Yechezmel v'asmecha akra. He brought a pasuk that said, "Kol ben nechar Erel Lev Erel Basar hachanami." Here too, by the hair of the Kohen. Gemara Gamirla v'asa Yechezkel v'asmecha akra, and that brings us to the two dots. A little bit more, we're going to be stopping 3 lines from the end of the page. Let's get into some Megillas Taanis yet again. Says the Gemara, 3/4 of the way down, 2 lines, 3 lines before the Y lines. Kol hakasev b'Megillas Taanis, delola misped lefana, delola misped. Whenever we see in Megillas Taanis, you can't fast, you can't do a hesped, that day is a day of simcha. Lefana basar la'achrav mutter. You cannot be masped the day prior, but you are allowed to be masped the day after. Tana Rabbanan, Elain Yomaya. These days, delo lehisana behon, that you are not allowed to fast on them. Umiksashon delo lemisped behon, and there are some days that you're not allowed to be masped. So, what are some of these days that have this unique balance? It says the Gemara, first long line, Meireish Yarcha de Nisan ve'atman yabe. From Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the 8th of that month, till the 8th of Nisan, itokam tmida delola mispad behon. There's an assumption, there's a itokam, we have a gzeira, a takana, that we're not supposed to be maspid during that time period. Mitmanya Bay on the 8th of Nisan ad sof moada, until the end of the moed. What moed are we talking about? Of course, we're talking about Pesach. It's the month of Nisan. Itosav chaga de shvuaya, because we were able to then establish the chag of Shavuos, the lola mispad behon. All of this had to do with machlokos that the Prushim were having with the tzdukim. And when they were victorious, when the Prushim were victorious over the tzdukim, they wrote in Megillas Taanis, this is a shtickle yontif, and we're not going to make sure that there's no hespedim. We're going to make sure that there's no fast days on these days. Lama le mereish yarcha, says the Gemara in regards to the first of those days when we said Amar Mar, thank you very much. You know, every time I skip a line, you're always the one to catch me. Thank you for paying attention. Third line of the Y lines. Amar Mar mereish yarcha de Nisan atmanya be yitokam tmida delola mispad. Amar Mar, quoting the line from the Brisa, and then the Gemara asks on that Lama le mereish yarcha. Why is it that in Megillas Taanis they had to establish that the first of the days that they would not be maspid was the Rosh Chodesh? Lema mitrei b'Nisan. All you need to do is say on the second day of Nisan. Why? Because for Rosh Chodesh gufa yom tov hu aser, we already have a status on that day that we're not maspid. If ever there's a kvura, if ever there's a levaya on that day, it's really not appropriate to be maspid. Fine. So Amar Rav lo nitzrach ela leser yom shelafana. The reason why Megillas Taanis wrote Rosh Chodesh, even though that day didn't need it, was to remind us that the day before also was a day that you should not be maspid. It says the Gemara, Shalafan of Nami, the day before, but I already know that from Rosh Chodesh. Well, every time we said that you're going to have a day that is Asur Behesped, the day before is also Asur. That's what it said over there. So Rosh Chodesh. We should already be saying that the day before, the last day of the previous month, also you can't be maspid on, because at the end of the day, it's still the day before, or a day that you're not allowed to be maspid. Says the Gemara, no. Rosh Chodesh d'oraisa v'doraisa lo b'chizuk. We know, and we've learned this principle, I believe, 2 times before, that when there is Rosh Chodesh, we don't need a reminder for the day prior. So that means that the reminder that we're giving in Megillas Taanis by selecting Rosh Chodesh as part of the count of restrictions is to remind us of a din d'Rabbanan. U'deraisa lo b'chizuk. When it comes to a day like Rosh Chodesh, which is a day that's d'oraisa, we don't need any chizuk. The Tanya, the Brisa writes as follows. 7 lines from the bottom. Hayomim ha'ele haksuvim b'Megillas Taanis. These days that are written in the Sefer Megillas Taanis, lifnein ula'acharein asurim. Both before and after, they're going to be forbidden. Shabbosos v'yamim tovim hein asurin. When it comes to Shabbos and Yom Tov, the day themselves, lifnein ula'acharein mutarim. The days themselves are problem, but the days themselves are problematic. You're not allowed to be maspid, but the day before and the day after is mutter to be maspid. How do we distinguish in this brisa, the brisa that's 5 lines from the bottom of the page, between the beginning of the brisa of lifneinu lacharein asurin and the end of the brisa which says lifneinu lacharein mutarin? Very simple. Halalu divrei Torah. When we're talking about dinei deoraisa, divrei Torah ein tzrichin chizuk, we don't need to remind ourselves about dinei deoraisa. So therefore, the day prior doesn't need to be like the day of. When we have a day that's only restricted midrabanan in regards to hespedim, that you're not allowed to give a hesped on day X. So the day prior to day X needs chizuk because that day is only derabanan. But when it comes to Rosh Chodesh, when it comes to Shabbos and Yom Tov, we don't need that at all. And halalu divrei sofrim tzrichin chizuk, and therefore Megillas Taanis wrote Rosh Chodesh to remind us of the derabanan status of the fact that we're not allowed to be maspid. We'll stop right here, 3 lines from the bottom. We'll pick up in Mir Hashem tomorrow night for Daf Yomi. Wishing you all a beautiful night.